Some of you may recall that approximately 1 month ago, I posted a video to share with the Colossal forum, which pertained to the idea of marine aquaculture becoming an integral part of sustainable desert cities. Sadly, not many people watched it, and even fewer responded to it. Nevertheless, what you see before you is a second-generation rendition of the idea. Like with the previous video, we are using our imagination here to discuss scenarios which City Skylines wasn't necessarily built around. Take what I say with a grain of salt, no pun intended, and know that one of these days I do plan to put my money where my mouth is and to show an actual scientific paper I have discussing the real-world ins and outs of this proposed tech. If you like the ideas I present in this video and think that I am actually not a complete dumbass, feel free to drop a sub to the channel as it tells me I should do this more often. Now let's get started. We begin this time with a bay adjacent to a nearby ocean, a topography very similar to the San Pablo Bay, northeast of San Francisco, California. This is actually quite convenient for our purposes, as the San Pablo Bay has a typical water volume between 18,000 and 38,000 acre-feet. For reference, 25,000 acre-feet would be equivalent to more than 800 million US gallons of water. The relative salinity of the San Pablo Bay averages to 25 parts per thousand, or about 2.5%. The salinity of the nearby Pacific Ocean is between 3.2 and 3.7%. So it is more advantageous to take water from the bay because it is not only easier to desalinate in the long run, but its brine can be gradually brought up to the correct salinity for growing sea kelp and other marine algae species. Our farms in this hypothetical city would be the place for growing our sea kelps and algae and what have you. Water would first be diverted into these lands, and the water that is not needed for this purpose would then be transported through the system to the nearby desalination plant and reservoir at the top of a large elevated area. This forms a hydroelectric kinetic battery, which can later reclaim some of the energy used to desalinate the water. We can also place wind turbines and/or solar panels over our water reservoir to further generate electricity and to also reduce evaporative losses of the water that we spent so much time, money, and energy to desalinate. If the water is not at an optimal state for drinkability, further purification can occur after it passes through the kinetic system. Eventually, it does end up back in the drinking water supply for us humans to consume. Anything that is not consumed goes back into the bay to regulate the bay's salinity and maintain the ecosystem. So voila, we just need to create a similar water mass in the desert and build our city around it. Sending bay water into the desert via pipeline or even by rail can be made sustainable, provided our sea kelps and algae are consuming enough carbon and nitrogen to improve the overall environment. You'd be surprised just how fast they can grow under the right conditions. After all, many of us have heard about the sargassum seaweed in the Atlantic, which grew to be 5,000 miles long. I couldn't make that up if I damn well tried. Next comes the logistical side of our city. You can see that this city wound up being a lot more population dense than the previous one. Not only are there twice as many people, but the total land area used is a lot smaller and more efficiently planned. It also took me a lot less time, I must say. Maybe I am getting better at this. The centerpiece of this city is again the cargo airport, which is where the bulk of imports are coming from. Sadly, there was no capacity for rail on this map. Like with the previous city, freight trucking and last mile trucking remain the most critical elements to design around. Rather than build a central freeway this time, I built 2 bypass highways and 1 central expressway to ferry traffic quickly from the main freeway into either of the 2 wings of the city, and more slowly into the central aquaculture area. This time, I did rely more on trams instead of monorail for all of the reasons that I explained in the previous video. I implore you to go watch that video if you have not seen it. Trams get a decent amount of use in this city, but like with the previous city, walking and biking are the dominant ways to get around. There are paths everywhere in order to discourage the need for personal vehicles. Realistically, only the most far out neighborhoods require it, because getting a tram to that area just wasn't feasible. I admit, I am not perfect. With the logistics sorted, next came city services. Making sure there are enough fire stations, police stations, medical clinics, parks. It's always a constant struggle. Education is even harder. As the city gets more dense, it doesn't take long for the schools to become overcrowded. City Skylines seems to proportion 2 to 3 elementary schools for each high school, and 3 to 5 high schools for each college or university. That may be well and dandy, but allocating land area to schools means not allocating that area to, say, a new residential building. In the age of technology, it seems like a missed opportunity where high-rise residential buildings with several hundred tenants, but only a few dozen school-age students, could also have communal tutoring areas all networked to the same school system. That way, you could have conference rooms with 20 to 30 mixed-grade students, supervised by 1 or 2 administrative proctors in the room, but the students are each logged into different courses over the internet. Just something to think about. Honestly, that was it for this rendition. I accomplished everything I had set out to quite easily compared to the first attempt. I'm still very much adamant about growing sea kelp in the desert, and it seems I'm not the only one looking at viable algae species for that environment. Time will tell whether the US adopts such a practice or not, but until then, I will keep doing my part to examine what is possible. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.